Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Low Budget Review Show. I am your host, Eric Smith, and today I am talking about Spider-Man, Kraven's Last Hunt by Neil Kleid. I don't know how you say his name, but it is a novelization of the comic book series by J.M. DeMatteis. Again, don't know how to say his name, and Mike Zeck. That name I can say. That's some Mike Zeck art there on the cover. There's some Mike Zeck art there on the back cover. And so Spider-Man, Kraven's Last Hunt. It was 6 issues. Before I get into the story, talk a little bit about the comic, which, as I said, it was 6 issues. And at the time that it came out, which was, I don't know when. Let's see if this will actually give me the year that it came out. I don't see it quickly. But at the time, there were 3 Spider-Man comics. Probably Amazing Spider-Man, Spectacular Spider-Man, and Web of Spider-Man. Don't quote me on that. Each one with its own story going on. Typically, they'd have their own creative teams. They'd be telling their own stories. But they felt that this story, when J.M. DeMatteis, that's how I'm going to say his name, when he presented the story and everything and it was okayed, they felt it was so important, and to avoid possibly confusing people, that they would run it through 2 issues of each of those titles. So 6 issues total, 2 issues of Amazing, 2 issues of Spectacular, 2 issues of Web, if those are the issues, the titles that were out. I know that information is in here somewhere. I saw it. I thought it was on the copyright page. But again, quick scan. More of a quick scan. But I'm not seeing it. It's got to be somewhere. But anyway. So it ran through those 6 issues. And it is one of the most popular, if not the most popular, Spider-Man story in Spider-Man's history. It is 1987. And I meant to read the inside flap before doing this to see what I could say about this story, because I don't want to spoil anything. Let's see. So Peter Parker, the Amazing Spider-Man, has just taken a big step, revealing his dual identity to his longtime girlfriend, Mary Jane Watson. But their relationship is tested when Peter learns that an old friend was secretly the master villain called the Hobgoblin. Even worse, Peter feels partly responsible for the Hobgoblin's death. Now a greater threat lies in the wings. Kraven the Hunter. Driven mad by years of defeat, Kraven vows to destroy the spider once and for all, and take his place on the streets of New York. Distracted and guilt-ridden, Peter quickly falls prey to Kraven's traps, and Kraven isn't alone. The half-man called Vermin was once a brilliant scientist, but dangerous experiments have reduced him to a near-animal state. Easy prey for Kraven, who plans to use Vermin as a pawn in his final gambit against Spider-Man. Can Peter's love for Mary Jane bring him back almost literally from the dead? And if it does, what will be left for the Hunter? Alright, so there you go. That's the flap. I don't think that gave too much away. So, first of all, let's get this out of the way for anybody familiar with the comic book story. There are 2 big changes in this story. They're essentially surface changes, and I don't think they don't affect the story in any way. One, at the time in the comics, I'm 99.9999% certain Peter Parker and Mary Jane were married. And in this book, they are not. And it says somewhere in here, I read something somewhere that said that was to reflect essentially the events of One More Day, whatever it is, when Mephisto took Peter Parker's marriage away. So I guess it's so as not to confuse people that aren't necessarily familiar with the older stuff. When Peter Parker and MJ were married. They're not married in here, but that doesn't change anything as far as their relationship goes. And, as you can see from the cover, at the time of this story, It was post symbiotic costume. Peter Parker had learned that his black costume that he got during Secret Wars was an alien or a life form. He had gotten rid of it. It's probably the point where the Fantastic Four have it before it's Venom. But after getting rid of it, Spider-Man, Peter Parker decided to keep wearing a black costume. So he made a black costume, excuse me, that looked like the symbiotic costume. And so he was wearing that, as you can see in this picture. But in the book, he's wearing red and blue. Again, since it's not the Venom symbiote, it doesn't make a difference as far as the story at all. And again, I think that's to avoid any confusion for people who aren't familiar with the entire story of Spider-Man and who might think if he's wearing a black costume, it's the symbiote costume when it wasn't. So anyway, Peter and MJ not married, red and blue costume, despite having the black one on the cover. So, all of that being said, holy cow, I hope people didn't drift off during all of that. Let's talk about the book. Oh, one more thing. I have not read the original comic book. It is a huge gap in my reading, and I knew the beats of the story, at least the major parts, to major things. But I have not read the comic. I'm definitely going to fix that before the end of the year, I hope. So, a lot of this was brand new to me. And basically what you have, as it said in the flap, Peter has just found out that a friend of his was the Hobgoblin, and he's dead. So Peter's feeling guilt, and, he's always had this crushing sense of responsibility. Feels, I blame Uncle Ben, feels that everything is his responsibility. A little too much responsibility on his part, personally. So after this thing with the Hobgoblin, he's feeling down. He tells Mary Jane that he's Spider-Man, but then then there's Kraven. Kraven shows up and gets into Spider-Man's head, messes with him real good. I don't want to say too much, because if you're not familiar, if you haven't read the comic book, then, well, read the comic book. I mean, that's the source material. But this is a great telling of that story. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars for the too long didn't watch, although we might be past that point now. I absolutely gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I thought this was a really well-written book, and it has the feel of a horror novel. You have a half-man, half-rat killing and eating people. You have a man slowly, maybe not so slowly, descending into madness. You have someone who, as it says in the flap, almost literally returning from the dead. And I don't know how verbose the comic book is, since I haven't read it. This really, really digs into the minds of the characters. We get deep into Peter Parker's mindset, Kraven's, Vermin's, MJ's. So it's psychological horror with the physical horror of a half-man, half-rat cannibal. It felt like a comic book version of a Del Abyss novel to me at times, because of the way it's getting into the characters' heads. There's hallucinations, there's nightmares, there's just questions of what's real and what isn't, and how are people going to handle it. It's I really, really enjoyed this. I don't know if I would have had the same reaction if I'd already read the comic book, but I'd like to think I would, simply because it is so well written and really digs in to the characters. I don't know if, when reading the comic, they're sort of assuming that you have familiarity with the characters, so they don't need to get as deep. I'm sure they got into the, tortured, kind of guilt-ridden mindset of Peter Parker, because that's a lot of Spider-Man comics. But yeah, I highly recommend this. If you're a comic book fan, a Spider-Man fan, I absolutely recommend it, whether or not you've read the comic. I think if you've read the comic, still go ahead and read this. I read plenty of novelizations of things I've read before, movies I've seen before, and if you get a good one, it's going to give you more, or a different perspective in some cases. And this, I think, probably gives you more. Really, really character driven. Really gets into it, and I really enjoyed it. The more I think about it, when I start talking about it, I'm feeling maybe I should bump up the rating. I mean, this isn't some masterpiece. This isn't War and Peace, or The Stand, or some classic, but it's incredibly entertaining, very well written. Absolutely has horror vibes. It's got illustrations in it. It's not overdone with illustrations, and they're all basically panels from the comic. Trying to find a decent one to show off. We had one of Vermin, but I seem to be passing them all by. Nope, not going to show that one. I'm a huge fan of Mike Zeck. He did some of my favorite work on Shang-Chi, Master of Kung Fu. Again, you can see his Kraven right there. I have 3 of his prints hanging on my wall, right over there. I'm looking at them right now. I have a reproduction of the cover for Marvel Superheroes Secret Wars #1. I have the pencil and ink version of a Captain America cover. So it's black and white. It has the borders of essentially what he drew it on. Obviously, this is a reproduction. There's no title or anything, and there's little notes in the margins and stuff. And then I have a Captain America cover that features Deathlock, one of my favorite characters. They're beautiful pieces. I wish his store was still open. There was a lot of other good stuff that I would have liked to have picked up. But anyway, huge fan of Mike Zeck's artwork. And J.M. DeMatteis, just a classic writer of comic books. And so yeah, 4.5. 4.5. I'm not even going to question that part. 4.5 stars for Spider-Man: Kraven's Last Hunt by Neil Kleid. I don't know. Based on the 6-issue comic book story. This says graphic novel. Don't get me started on that. So let me see. Did I cover? I've sort of been rambling and gushing because I really, really enjoyed this book. So I'm trying to think if I covered everything. Hopefully you've got the basics of the story. I read the inside flap. That's all you need. Just well written. Great character work. And lots of horror elements make this a fantastic story. I'm going to check like Half Price Books and see if they have a collected edition. If not, I have seen it online, so I can pick it up. I'll see if my local comic book store can maybe get it. Because I like to support them. But I'm definitely going to have to read the source material. So that's it. All right, one more time. Spider-Man: Kraven's Last Hunt. 4.5 out of 5. Oh, and this is, I think this is when Marvel was publishing their own books. because all I can find on here is Marvel. Marvel Worldwide Inc., a subsidiary of Marvel Entertainment. I do not see manufactured by Sheridan Books Inc. Yeah, there was a point when Marvel was just putting out their own. Now there's, I think, Titan, definitely Aconite. I think there might be 2 or 3 people that are publishing Marvel books. But anyway, there you go. And I think it's still available. You might be able to even get it in paperback. All right. So, question for this video is, it's pretty basic. Have you read the comic book Kraven's Last Hunt? As I said, it is one of the most, if not the most, popular Spider-Man story, I believe. It's iconic. It's classic. Somehow I missed it. 87, I would have been in the Air Force, so I wasn't getting comics at the time. Would be why I didn't pick it up, because I was getting all sorts of Spider-Man comics before. I definitely was getting Web of Spider-Man, which might be, now I'm trying to think, if he was wearing red and blue in one title and black in another. Interesting. That's back when people weren't insane about continuity and stuff. But yeah, so I would have been in the Air Force. My first full year in the Air Force, out in California. Not picking up comic books at the time, or if I was, it was very few. So yeah, it's definitely a stage when I wasn't buying comic books every week. Huge collector, doing videos on YouTube about what I've picked up for the week. So that's, I think, understandable how I missed it. Don't know why I never picked up a collected edition. But absolutely want to read it now. But have you read it? What did you think of it? Is it one of your favorites? If you haven't read it, does this make it sound interesting? If you've read it, does it bother you about the 2 changes in the story? I don't think it makes any difference whatsoever. Peter and MJ are a serious couple, but not married within this story, and he's wearing a different costume. Let me know your thoughts. And I guess if you've never read it, does this book interest you? Does it make you want to read that storyline? Let me know all that in the comments below. And if you have any comments, questions, or corrections, please put those in the comments below. Comments are open for spoilers. Just post a spoiler warning. We try to be polite here at the Low Budget Review Show. Please like, share, and subscribe. All the usual YouTube stuff. If you'd care to follow me on other social media, my Twitter is @Ronan5757. My Instagram, where I post pictures of books, comic books, board games, and fuzzy animals, is EricSmith5757. That's Eric with a K, ERIKSMITH5757. On Blue Sky, if you're there, I am @ELSmith. That's all I've got. This has been the Low Budget Review Show. I have been Eric Smith, and until next time, read more books.